I always had trouble accepting applause before I did my job. So leave the applause for later, and if I do the right job, then you clap your hands. Otherwise, I can become lazy, which I don't want to become. It's a great honor to be here in this place because it's a mecca of intellects. It's University of Oxford. Just imagine how many intellectual, creative thoughts have been created in this place. What kind of energy must be there? I could only compare it to Silicon Valley in the US for some reason, and it's not taxes, definitely, in case of California. They've got all the biggest corporations and all creative ideas when it comes to IT, computer science, and so on, have been created there. There must be something about Oxford as well, so I salute this place. I thank you very much, all the British people who are here, because it's a great honor to be welcomed on your lands, and I thank you very much for this. To be a guest in every place is always a different story for someone who's a host and for someone who's visiting. And finally, it's great pleasure to być z wami Polacy right now, because hopefully my experiences, especially international experiences, have been of great use for your ever-growing potential as a nation, as a tribe, as immigrants, and as citizens of the world. And it's a fantastic phenomenon that we are, as Dagmara presented, it's in a certain way our stories about ourselves. So you say, I'm Polish, or I'm British, or I'm American, or I'm Pakistani, whatever. As a matter of fact, it's nothing else than just a story we tell ourselves. And this story exists on a certain level. If you take a look at it, and we take the most famous, we're in Britain, so let's stick to British football clubs and the most famous teams. Manchester United would be number one, and number two would be what? Barcelona in Britain. I am proud to be Polish, and I am proud to know geography. So you, please, do your homework, sir. There's to represent us well here. So Manchester United and Chelsea. Let's go for this one. So I understand that Manchester United and Chelsea, they fight with each other when they have a match, right? When they have a game. They are opponents. But for some reason, they stop being opponents when England is against Germany. Right now, they are the best friends, right? So before, they were enemies, but for some reason, they decided to forget about being from Manchester or being Chelsea. For some reason, you always have to reason to move the planet. You have to have a motive. You have to have a cause. There is a cause. A cause is bigger than those identities separated, because there's a common enemy. Manchester United cannot defeat Germany. Germans are too strong. Chelsea cannot do this. Neither. So right now, Germans are the enemies. But then Europe is against Brazil. Suddenly, Hans becomes the best friend of John. Suddenly, John says, well, let me buy, a nail for you. You're my best friend. Let me show you London, and so on and so on. So suddenly, we stop being English, and we stop being German, and now we are Europeans. The only solution I see here is humans against aliens to connect the planets and to unify us all. But from a certain standpoint, even though I was born in Poland, and I do speak Polish among 8 other languages, and well, I have serious trouble identifying with any culture. I just think that if we have an option to be an earthling, to be a human being, why to be only Polish or only British? I could never understand it, really. If you can be both man and a woman, why to choose only one? Especially that, depending on the culture where you are, it's a different story what it means to be man or what it means to be a woman. I spent 2 years in Brazil working, and I speak fluent Portuguese. And in Brazil, they have a completely different attitude towards masculine-feminine relationship. Let's just say that they are way more open and active when it comes to commencing a relationship and chatting someone up in the street and so on and so on. When you think about what machismo is in Brazil and you compare it to the way Germans think about what it means to be a man, you will see huge differences. Now, which story is true? Which story is relevant? On a certain level, there's no story which is true. So even though I can speak Polish and I behave like Polish, it doesn't make me Polish. It's a behavior. There's a Chinese saying which says, if it walks like a chicken, if it talks like a chicken, if it looks like a chicken, it must be a chicken. No, it might be a duck that is lying. We know that very well from politics, don't we? And it seems to be quite international, so everyone can understand that. Well, see, and it's a phenomenal situation also from cerebral point of view, in which some of you being Polish and living here, you are not so Polish anymore because the brain starts adapting. When I was driving a car for many, many years, obviously thinking that I'm the best driver in the world, and I'm sure that many men can connect to that. This is where our identity and self-esteem is taken from. So when I was driving a car, then many years after, I decided to pass examination for a motorcycle. So I started riding a bike. And what happens later on was that the first change and transformation that I observed was not that I only started to be a better biker. I also noticed that the first thing that changed was my ability to drive a car. So here's the question: how come doing something different changes something that I officially haven't trained? So some of you are Polish and you come to Britain, but now you're not only Polish, neither British, you're Brolish. And Brolish is way more intelligent. You can be a gentleman without political correctness. And Polish do need to know what gentleman means. Now you become a synergy. See? You become a synergy. You become something else entirely. It changes you. If you keep on pretending you're British, being Polish, then you're just a copy. You're a copycat. You're someone who will never be Van Gogh. You're someone who can be almost like Van Gogh, but you will never be one. Or then you say, okay, but I stay Polish. If you stay only Polish, you become dysfunctional and not effective because you're in a different land where being Polish doesn't work the way being English works. So many people try both versions. They say, I will stay Polish, so you speak Polish, but you're in Britain, you cannot only speak Polish. Or you say, but I become British, then you're a copycat because you're not British. So then there's a question that all of us have, sooner or later, especially right now in Facebook era and Earthlink era, who am I? Am I this or that? Should I become a copy so that nobody notices? But then I feel ashamed. Then I never feel good enough because the point of reference that I've chosen is not accessible. It's idealistic. Ego is always conceptually idealistic, so I idealize it, and then I try to achieve it, but it never works. So then I say, okay, I don't change, I stay Polish in here. But if you stay Polish in here, you don't adopt. Then you lose effectivity. We know very well from biology that the most effective organisms are the ones that adopt to the environment. If you don't fight the current and you swim with it and you go with it, you're simply faster than the ones who lose strength fighting the currents. So the current might be a market, the current might be a social trend, current might be intellectual trends, current might be certain developmental stage of human consciousness. There's a certain current. Do you see the current or you're inside of it? Well, actually both. But when you become Brolish, then you can take the best parts of being this and of being this. And then you become way more effective than Manchester United and Chelsea, because now you're English. English is way more clever than only Manchester United or Chelsea, because they have certain habits that locally function, but they will not function on a micro scale. So now when you're Brolish, but now you go and you live abroad. You go to Germany, and you live in Germany and you have a Spanish wife. Then there's a completely different story, because now you live in Germany, you came from here, you went to Germany, so now you become Grobolish. Well, it's the art of synergy, right? Now you're Grobolish, but actually, plus this, you're Grobanish. And now you're Grobanish. But then you say, they say, who are you? And you say, I'm an earthling. Finally, you get to the point when you feel you're a human being, and the planet is the whole place, which is your home. But then somebody asks you the question, where are you from? And you say, well, I'm from Groboland. And they look at you without understanding. Well, they cannot understand you because they function in a micro-scale mentality where they identify with concepts which are small, very small, tiny sometimes. Being Polish is a tiny concept. Being from Warsaw is even tinier. Being from Europe is bigger. Being an earthling is a planetarian, is even bigger. Being a spiritual being is even bigger. So the only question is, on which scale do you move, and where do you consider yourself to be? We get to the point where we need to start creating ourselves. We literally need to imagine ourselves into the future and do something that no other animal is capable of doing. See, if you have a mouse and the mouse is eaten by a cat, then small mice, which are children of this mouse, see mother mouse being eaten, and they will still repeat the same mistake and probably die from the bite of a cat. Mice will not change, they will not transmute, they will not convert into something different. Mice will repeat the same story all over again. But what I can do with Mateusz, I can literally imagine different Mateusz in 2017, 2018, and what will happen is that I can take action to create him. I can literally have a picture of him being different, for instance, slimmer, and then I can take an action to pursue it and finally make this come true, because I have imagination. The thing is that we, as humanity, we don't quite tend to create ourselves. We tend to live the stories of people who have created us. For example, your parents have imagined a child, but they couldn't have imagined you. You have been a surprise for the concept of a child of your parents. Of course, when you were born, then they started to create you. It had nothing to do with you. They gave you the language, and inside the language, there were already certain paradigms which have created you a certain way. For instance, if you are born in Mexico and you speak Mexican Spanish, which I do because my wife is Mexican, then when you want to say that something is bad, you say que madre. Madre means mother, right? When you say to beat someone up, you say madrear, which is a verb, to mother someone. When you want to say no, you say unta madre. See, when you talk about Bruce, but not Bruce Willis, but Bruce here, then it's called madrazo. Everything is connected with the mother, right? And when something is in disorder, for instance, child didn't clean up, it's desmadre, which literally from Latin means without mother, right? But on the other hand, if you say that something is amazing, you say que padre. So, see, now you can applaud because you applaud knowledge, you don't applaud me, right? There's no reason to applaud me, but there's a reason to applaud knowledge. Finally, we're in Oxford. So this is where the knowledge is born. Let's give birth to some more knowledge. This is probably the best way we can adopt to this place. Give birth to more intelligence so that humanity is more clever and conscious. So, of course, this means father, right? Padre. You are born inside of it, and you don't realize how funny it sounds when you look at it from the perspective. Just like the word, which in Polish means samolot. which means flies on its own. The Czechs cannot understand how the bloody plane flies on its own. They look at it and they laugh at it, because to them it literally means that the machine can do something on its own, which logically does not make sense and it's not based on facts. But we're so much used to the word that we don't see how weird it is. So we are born into this language being small Mexicans, and now there's the question, what kind of effect does it have on us and the way we model the world and we see the situation that's around us? I'm not sure if you know that if the language is patriarchy-based, which means it's based on masculine domination, the participation of female workforce, which is women, falls 12% on the market. What it does do to the economy of the country is a disaster, because right now at this very stage, depending on the research that you use as the point of reference, around 90% of shopping decisions are made by women. A man is paying, of course. Right? This is the way he defines his power. He says, I'm the one who has the object, which is called money. But behind the veneers, behind the curtain, there is a woman, his wife, who decides what she's going to do. So we are born into a certain ideas of the world, and then we start functioning in this, and suddenly we become patriarchic just because everything that we say is bad is about mother, and father is so good. So it changes the way we perceive our reality. As a matter of fact, there's no access to reality because there's certain filters which have been implemented inside of you which have nothing to do with you. And they have been implemented, by the way, if the language is balanced, like Swedish, for instance, right, has nothing to do with masculine and feminine. This is where the English, or, well, the Americans, the English, have done a really good job of fighting for the concept of police officer, not policeman. Fire brigade officer, not fireman. Because then, what will happen once the language is balanced, the participation of female workforce on the market rises 3%, above participation of men. It does change the economy. It does change the energy of the market, because if the market is just more masculine, it's more aggressive, it's more capitalistic, it's more based on eating other companies, and female markets are way more cooperative. So it completely changes the culture and the way we start perceiving it. The models that you live and the models you live by are mostly coming from your family and mostly coming from your society. So that's why it's a great honor and intellectual pleasure to have a profound experience of speaking to brawls and speaking to international crowd which understands the world in a completely different way. Statistically, London has more foreigners than the British. So it does change the way not only the London is functioning as a certain consciousness and as a field, intellectual field, social field, emotional field, relational field, it does change the way British who live, the English who live in London, perceive the reality as well. Becomes more cosmopolitan, becomes more open. It has to, because of tolerance that is brought from obligatory perspective from the outside world. We have to adopt or we die. This is how it simply functions in the animalistic world. So the first models come from family and society. And the question is, okay, if I live with a computer that is my brain, where does programming come from, right? If the programming comes from my childhood and I'm not conscious of it, it's like having a new iPhone 6 and using Commodore 64 or Atari software. And this is mostly how people live. Imagine a person who has a phobia of public speaking, number one, when it comes to popularity in the world. And there's the person, and he's 40 years old, and his name is Tom, right? And he's the boss of a big company. He runs a multi-million company, and then what happens is that each time he's supposed to be on stage, his hands are shaking and he's sweating and he has all these negative reactions. when he was 6 years old, on one of the first lessons at school, he was talking because he didn't know he was supposed to be silent. So the teacher, because she felt threatened by losing power, she resorted to authoritarian power that was given to her by the state, by a certain idea, by a concept which is called the law. So she said, you, Tommy, you come here and you tell us all what's so clever about what you're saying. So she put him into shame. His brain made a neurosynaptical connection between being on stage and negative emotion, and that's it. That's how primitive and simple that connection is. Yet he hasn't changed it because he was unconscious of it. So he didn't participate in psychological classes. He had different classes at school. For instance, he was learning how much carbon was excavated in China in 1975. And he was learning about the history of economics, but he was not learning how to make money. So 34 years later, this person has a modern computer, which is called brain, yet he hasn't changed his programming for the last 30 years. So he becomes dysfunctional. It's not that he has a problem because of the bad childhood. It has nothing to do with it. So he has been created in a certain way. His phobia has been created by his teacher. And then, of course, he wants to get married finally, and he does get married. But when he does get married, he divorces just like his parents did. That gentleman is going to divorce not because he had a bad childhood, but because he modeled a point of reference in which a definition of relationship is temporary constraints. It's limited. He didn't change the model, so his brain is doing what it knows. If someone has a hammer, there's only nails around. A great deal of my life developing models which are used to substitute family and social models of perceiving the world with your own creations. From Maslow's perspective, this is the peak, the top necessity that we as human beings have, which is self-realization. From my perspective, because I perceive it in a different way, it's just halfway through. There's more important things than being yourself. For instance, serving the world is way more important than being yourself. Being yourself on a certain level is egocentric. But even though it's not the top of the necessities, if you become who you want to be because you've created yourself, the quality of your life will be uncomparable with what you have experienced so far. Because the question is, and it's a basic question, how much of you is inside of you? And that's the most basic question that I've been asking myself and people all over the world wherever I go. So, firstly, let's talk about the best organization. We talk about the business company and about enterprise, about the venture. Everyone knows what they should be doing, as there is a clear division of duties, right? An accountant does the books. Salesman is selling. Marketing does the advertising. Everything is divided. Everyone fulfills their own aims and common aims, own objectives and common objectives, which means I cannot only think about my commission as a salesman. I have to think if the whole company is functioning, because if Chicago Bulls loses, Michael Jordan cannot be MVP. So I think on a collective and on individual level. Nobody encroaches on others' competencies, which means that nobody is entering someone else's shoes. The bookkeeper should keep the books instead of selling, because then we have a problem. Imagine that this hand wants to become a leg. And suddenly this hand goes shopping and she says, well, or it says, let's buy some shoes instead of gloves. Then you become dysfunctional, but from the point of view of hands, the only way to protect you is to buy gloves. From the point of view of legs, is to buy trousers. From the point of view of your head, is to buy a hat. Imagine that we only use our head to perceive the world, and suddenly instead of socks, you end up with hats on your feet. Obviously, you cannot function because you're using the wrong tool for the wrong context. And the truth is that context defines a tool. Example, tool is screaming. If I scream at my child, it's dysfunctional. Not because screaming is bad, but because it's not used in a certain context. So now I go to a concert and everyone is jumping. If I'm screaming, then I'm functional again. It has nothing to do with screaming. It's simply understanding that if you want to put some sugar inside a cup, you don't use hammer to mix it, but a spoon. Most of us don't realize that there's functionality of every behavior in a certain context, because we haven't been told that context defines the tool. There are checks verifying the progress, which means that there's certain entity inside the company which makes sure that everything is functioning and everything is correct. And obviously there is a system of communication between members of the organization. They send emails and they communicate and they talk. This makes a good enterprise. Correct? You agree with that? Right? This is the company. That's it, right? If this is the company and we know how to create business, how come we don't use the same concept to run this company, which is our lives? Well, let's see. On your left, you will see women. On your right, you will see men. They are both the same when it comes to the role. What differs them is gender. So this is the role that you play at work. I thought that this actress in one of my favorite movies, which is Devil Wears Prada, would be a good example of being a boss or an employee, someone professional. This is the equivalent of her from masculine standpoint. This is your free time. This is a person you employ inside your head to take care of your free time, egocentric needs. This is a wife here who should partner her husband. This is someone's daughter, because unless you use certain religious models, you definitely have parents. This is a mistress. She's responsible for sexual activities. I do imagine that looking at her, you didn't focus on her intellectual depth. On depth, you did focus, but not intellectual. And she's the mother. She raises a child. He's a father. This is free time. This is a lover. I chose George Clooney on purpose because I thought that if I was a woman, I would like to have sex with George Clooney. So that's how simple it is, right? But what really is important here is the system, so don't worry too much about the faces. This is the husband, and this is an employee, and this is the son. If you want hammer to function well, you take a hammer, right? And you need a nail. And then you hammer the nail and everything is perfect, right? You want to screw a screw, you need a screwdriver. Well, let's just say it's a screwdriver. See, this is the reason why I've never become a painter. And for some reason, very understandable, people don't want to pay me money for it. But you have a screwdriver and now you need a screw, right? If you use a screwdriver and a screw, everything is perfect. Now, you have a glass and you have water. I don't know how to draw water, right? But you put this inside this and everything is functioning. Now, imagine that you want to hammer a screw. Maybe a certain way it's going to work. Now, exchange these tools for, let's say that someone is using nervousness to deal with situations. So the man is shouting, he's aggressive. When his son doesn't want to do his homework, he's shouting. When he goes to participate in a huge concert, he's shouting. When he's annoyed in a traffic jam in London, he's shouting. He's always shouting. Sometimes his nervousness is going to function very well, but most of the times he's going to be dysfunctional. It's not because he had a difficult childhood, it's because he only has a hammer, so he has to hammer all the time. No matter what happens, he uses the hammer, because this is the only model that he has been equipped with. So he uses hammer to mix sugar inside the cup. He uses hammer to clean his teeth. He uses hammer to nail the nails, perfect, and then it's functional. He uses hammer to defend himself. Maybe it's going to work, but he also uses hammer to discuss. So he says, I will convince you, and people get scared. So if you want this system to function, if you want this organization to function, then it's perfectly understandable and logical that employee should focus only on work and talk to the boss, or the boss should talk to the employee, because boss and employee are in a relationship. It's obvious that mother should only talk to her son, because mother and son are in a relationship, just like a hammer and a nail. It's absolutely obvious that wife belongs to husband and husband belongs to wife. It's so logical that father takes care of the daughter and that she and he connect together in certain intellectual activities. It's very reasonable to understand that free time goes in hand with free time and everything is functioning. Now, you understand very well that if you try to nail, if you want to hammer a screw, it doesn't work. So how come so many women who are officially wives start mothering their husbands? Gotcha. You should see your reactions are international even. I've been preparing you for this for the last 30 minutes, especially for this question. How come instead of being a boss in the company, someone becomes a mother? Or instead of being a boss for his employees, he becomes a father for them. And when he becomes a father, they cannot quit the job, because the father will always have remorse if he wants to disemploy a person. If you are a father inside the company, you are nailing a screw. It doesn't work. But the question is, A, if you're conscious of it, B, if you have created yourself, or better yet, if you have created yourselves. How do you know what it means to be a mother? Well, some of you are Polish, so let's see how you know what it means to be a mother. Let's move back to the 60s or 70s, or even 80s. Some of you still remember that. This is the plate. This is the soup. What has to happen with the soup when you start eating it? You have to eat up. You have to finish it. If you're not hungry anymore, it does not matter. You have to eat the bloody soup. Why? Well, there's logical explanations. A, because children in Africa are starving. You remember that, don't you? It's not rocket science. It's just memory. B, because you look like a skeleton. Actually, you always do. I noticed that for my mother, even if I'm damn fat, I'm always a skeleton. Well, and C, because it's good for you. So eat your soup. See, I'm also a psychologist. And having focused my attention for some time in marketing, we have a few interesting stories to tell you. One of them is one of the most famous experiments in psychology of marketing, experiment with the soup. They take a table, they screw a plate onto the table, they pour soup into it, and from underneath they put a pipe and they blow soup. So they put a person, and the person is eating the soup. But each time they are eating, more soup is brought into the plate. On the other side of the table, they have a person who is eating soup from a plate without an additional extra soup. What happens is that finally they get to the point, because they measure it, that on average a person who is eating with the soup that comes from the pipe is going to eat 70% more soup before they realize that they are not hungry anymore. What it means is that they don't listen to their body when they are eating. It means they want to finish the soup because the soup is still inside the bloody plate. And African children will die. Then, of course, this thing creates certain effects and certain results. One of the results is that they become fat. When they become fat, they feel bad about themselves. When they feel bad about themselves, they don't enjoy their sexuality so much. When they don't enjoy their sexuality so much, their self-esteem goes down. When their self-esteem goes down, they start making less money in the company. If the person who is self-confident does the same job as the person who is not self-confident, the self-confident one will make 14% more money doing the same thing, the same activity. The same goes for looks. It's exactly 14%. If someone is attractive doing the same thing as someone who's ugly, the attractive person will make 14% more money. So it gets to the point where suddenly eating more soup is destructive for the whole system. So here comes a very important question. If we take a child, I'm someone's son and you're someone's daughter. So I'm raised by my parents, and the parents put, consciously and unconsciously, certain models inside my head. So my mother says, you always be a good girl. You don't misbehave. You do the way you're asked to do. So now she creates this model of a wife, and the model is based on, I should always listen to my husband. But when she always listens to her husband is not challenged, so he becomes bored, so he betrays on her. When he betrays on her, she says, my model is not functioning. Well, I would like her to say that. Normally she will not do that. She will repeat the same story with a different husband, being surprised that all men are pigs. But it's not that she has a problem, it's that she has a model that is not functional anymore. How about I'm a child? I'm someone's child, I'm someone's son. I go to see my parents. My father just turned 61 a few days ago. So I go to visit him and I go to visit my mom. And my mom looks at me and she goes, you look so slim, my tiny skeleton, you eat more soup. Or she will give us more pierogis, which we as Poles know very well. So she gives you food. And she gives you more food and more food. Well, actually, it's and now, technically, you should eat till the moment where you don't feel hunger anymore and you stop, because we know that it's not going to save African children. We know that the food is going to be waste anyway. Oh, there's D. I'm sorry. There's another one. We don't waste food. Mom, if I eat it, according to very basic knowledge, I will digest it. It's called waste. Sometimes they call it shit, but it's still the same thing. It's waste, Mom. We don't waste food, right? That's another story that she was using. So now I go to my mother, and now I'm supposed to eat till I'm not hungry anymore. But for some reason, when she's giving me food, I feel remorse if I'm not eating anymore. I feel guilty. Why do I feel guilty? Well, see, because there's a difference between two kinds of managers. One manager is responsible for the strategy. Another one is operational. So the strategy says there needs to give love. And now, of course, the question of operational manager inside our head is, how will we give someone love? Well, I can give you love by being honest with you. I can give you love by hugging you. I can give you love by sending you an email. I can give you love by serving you, which I hope I'm doing well. I can give you love in many non-caloric ways. But not mothers from the 60s. Their operational model to give love was called feeding. Feeding frenzy. So they were giving you foods, and now you feel it unconsciously, because when she gives you food, she loves you. This is how she executes the need to give love. So now the question is, what happens if you don't accept food? What does she feel? She feels rejected. You don't want to reject your mother, so you eat. But when you eat, you reject yourself because you become fat and you do something against yourself. Isn't that a fascinating model that you suffer from? Always when you visit your parents, or you go the other way around. You say, I don't want to see them anymore. Because what has happened is that we know this so well from our smartphones. We connect them every 3 months and the model is updated, right? The software is updated. It's new, it's new, it's new. Apple sends, and Microsoft, they send updates all the time. How come we haven't updated the way we give love and we still do the same thing when the child is 5 or when the child is 65? Most parents, our parents, have no idea how to communicate with adult children because they have not changed the model. So what happens is that you have 2 options. Either you play the game and you're still a child, but in the body of someone who's 40 or 50, and you go, okay, mommy, I'll eat. Or you go into negativity and you say, I don't want to visit my mother anymore. In both cases, you lose, and she loses. Problem has nothing to do with feeding. Problem has to do with the model, because she executes giving love by feeding in 80% and taking care of you in 20%. And she takes care of you by always telling you what kind of problems are going to meet you. This is how she understands taking care of. So you say, Mom, everything will be okay. Well, you never know. And now you go into positive psychology, right? We should be optimistic. You remember that? So now you're positive and you say, Mom, you stop being so negative. And she stops being so negative. And now she loses 20% of her love. Now she gives love. And then you say, you don't give me so much food. And then suddenly she feels totally rejected. Totally rejected. And you lose contact with the mother because instead of substituting the model, you eliminated it. And if you eliminate any kind of behavior, then certain needs that is invisible cannot be executed by it. So I could continue with all these ideas. Who here has problems with having free time? If you have free time, you immediately start working. Or when you're supposed to do something for yourself, for your egocentric needs, immediately you feel guilty. Who here has this problem? Well, some of you. Why does this happen? Because you haven't employed a free time manager, an egocentric bloke who will take care of your free time, because you are not allowed free time by society, which is based on psychology of success, which is in which, when you say you have a lot of free time, means you're not working. If you're not working, you're lazy. That is necessary. So here is my organization of life, and then I go into being a wife. When I'm a wife, what should I do as wife? See, I will create a few new words for you, which might not exist in English. Mother, mothers. Correct? She mothers. This is a verb, this is a noun. Subject does the verb, right? Executes. So the mother executes mothering. Then, using the same logics, daughter, daughters. Correct? Well, that's the same logic. Elephant, elephants. Now you laugh a little bit because this is a new word, but this is the same system. The only way to be a butterfly is to butterfly. To execute butterflying, right? So, if a mother mothers, everything perfect. Now, this is the strategy. What does this mean in practice? To mother. Well, my first question is, how long do you mother? You employ a person inside your head. You create a mother, internal mother, and you say, your objective will be to take care of my child. For how long? How long will you be a mother? Well, you say forever. Of course you use the model, right? If you're the mother time-wise, whole life, how long does your son or daughter have to be a child? Aha, aha, now it bounces back. Oops, too late. You're inside the model where you have adopted to a concept of being a mother your whole life. If you're a mother your whole life, an adult person who is your son or daughter has to be a child. And now it leads to certain psychological consequences. For instance, learned disability, a concept of Seligman where the child might be 40 years old, but this child is not very capable of living alone, of taking decisions which are mature, of making their own money. I don't know British statistics, but I do know statistics from Poland and from USA, and I can tell you this. There's a concept right now which comes from Italy. It's called bamboccioni, or in English, kidults. Kid-adults. Kidults. In Poland, up to the age of 29, we have 43% of children living with their parents. We have a completely different society and a different model that we used to have 20 or 30 years ago. Who here, when they were becoming 18, 19, 20, the first thing that was on their mind was to escape their parents? Of course, because it was a different social model. What's the sense of escaping our parents right now if our parents have a Facebook account, if they know how to Twitter, if they can use cool clothes, and the only difference between them and friends is that they are friends with money who give you PlayStation when you're bored? What's the sense of escaping parents right now? So what have we done to our children? Well, we have mothered them and fathered them without giving them a certain moment when they can become independent. Father is always superior to his daughter or son. It's very simple. Father, how to execute a father? Give advice? Yeah, take care. Well, if you give advice, then someone needs to take it. How about giving advice to teenagers? I'm sure they will love it. We all love when we get advice, simply wants to talk about something, and husband, instead of listening, is starting to give advice because he wants to solve the problem. And she hates it because each time he delivers a solution, A, he's not listening, B, he's giving a message, you're an idiot, you cannot do it on your own. And suddenly, listening and not doing anything becomes more effective from therapy standpoint than talking and giving advice. But we as men derive our self-esteem not only from the cars we drive, but also from the knowledge we have, which means ability to solve problems. We don't know how to not solve problems, and we don't understand that mostly if they are unsolved, they will resolve themselves because they are emotionally dependent, and emotions only function in a certain period of time. If you wait, the emotion goes down. That's it. Emotion creates a problem. If there's no emotion, there's no movement for the problem. It disappears. So then we should also take care of our children. You take care of someone who is 5 years old in a different way than you take care of someone who is 45. If you don't change the way you understand taking care of someone, you will, as a father, talk to your adult daughter and give her advice what kind of boyfriend she should meet, and she will hate you for this. I decided simply that I will create a model. It's called ego management system, in which I will create my personalities. All this, then, models, have to be understood in a certain way and created with a certain objective. If a lover is to give pleasure, it's a different story than if we aim her at giving love. If my lover, let's carry on here, if my lover is to get love from sex, what happens if my wife is sick and she doesn't want to have sexual relationships? I feel rejected, as mostly men do. How does society accept a certain connection between those two personalities? Let's play with this concept. Imagine mother who has her baby cart, a trolley, right? And she goes out and she has high heels, and the miniskirt and the red lipstick, what are the others going to say? Wow, she must be a good mother. Oops, there's a different story. Apparently, society does not let combining, depending on the culture, does not let connecting certain personalities together. Is this going to create a conflict? Yeah, this is going to create the suppression of her sexuality, which will lead to problems in the marriage, which will statistically improve the possibility of divorce and betrayal on his side. Of course, it will have consequences. It all has consequences. The question is if you know the sequence and you understand which elements create it. So it has to function in a certain environment. If a man doesn't disengage his lover and put it only in a relationship with his wife, imagine they are walking down the street somewhere in Kensington, walking down the street, and suddenly his head moves all around because he sees so many beautiful women around. His wife will feel rejected, so he needs to know how to turn it off. But he doesn't know how to turn it off because he hasn't created his lover. He heard from TV that all men are sexual beasts and they think about sex every 3 seconds. That's the social. We should do certain activities to execute all these personalities. If you don't tell your brain precisely what it means to be a child or what it means to father your daughter, then your brain will not know what to do. Only 8% of the final day of the year resolutions will be executed after 6 months because people don't know how to plan it. They say, I want to be healthy. Brain doesn't know what to do with it. If you put it on a behavioral level and you say, I will run 3 times a week for 30 minutes before I eat breakfast, now you can execute it. And the chances of achieving this objective are higher. So you have to claim your activities, you have to know which relationships they go in, not to mix them, and you have to stop certain behaviors. So look at this. This is my ego management system. I have created my personalities to execute my life. And whom you see in front of you right now is a creation of my own ideas in which I imagine myself, I imagine myselfs, and I've been doing this for years, creating Mateuszes you see right now in front of your eyes. Husband, his aim is to build a relationship that is an example transcending culture and gender, fully integrating the versatility of humanity based on love and consciousness. Why should I transcend the culture? Because otherwise I have to play the patriarchy game from Mexico. I have to be a Latino lover, or I have to be a Polish advice giver. I simply don't want to play the game of being a Polish husband or a Mexican husband. I want to be a husband I have invented. And out of my experience, both professional and personal, there's 2 factors which help in this: love and consciousness. If you only love, you're stupid, but you have a connection. If you're only conscious, you understand the mechanisms, but it becomes a robotic, not spontaneous relationship. So I've decided to base it on both. He functions at home, when he dates her, on holidays, when he's with family, and in bed. You know what happens sometimes if she doesn't know how to turn off her internal wife? Imagine a situation, he's the boss of the company, he's talking to his employees, he's motivating them, he has authority, they're all clapping hands, he's getting admiration, he's so successful, and then his wife comes and she says, oh boy, Tommy, you have problems with your hair. And suddenly Tommy, who is Tom for all his employees, loses authority in one instant. She didn't understand that when he's the boss Tom, he cannot be Tommy for her. And it happens constantly that people don't know how to turn off their personalities and how to switch them on in certain moments. Example, most married people don't date. Only people who are not married date, as if it was only to get married and stop dating. What a boring model. It struck me completely in Mexico. You see people in the street holding hands only when they are in something they call noviazgo, which is when they are engaged. But when they are married, you will never see people holding hands in the street. As if when you're married, you don't need to sexually attract your partner anymore, because it's done, that's it, finito, thank you very much. Objective has been reached, mission complete. When it comes to time, he phones or texts her once or twice a day. Date is always once a week. They have a rule of 5-5-15. 5 minutes every day of compliments, 5 minutes every day of touching and cuddling, because this is one of the best ways to give love, and 15 minutes of conversation. How are you? What's going on in your life? What have you learned today? Where we cannot talk about work or children. Absolutely not. The system has been organized. Is it spontaneous? Yes, only now it can be. Otherwise, you spontaneously, after 30 years of marriage, realize you don't know the person who's sleeping with you. And that happens spontaneously. Now, people don't divorce unless it's betrayal or something of this sort. People don't divorce just like that. Mostly people divorce because their relationship deteriorates minute after minute, day after day, week after week, because they haven't figured out the system in which at least once a day they should have a small conversation. It's only 15 minutes, but oh boy, will it give you energy for the whole day later on. Well, when it comes to having sex, I will not tell you how many times an hour, but I'm sorry, I'm just being a cheap man, that's it, right? But the official statistics are saying that couples that maintain sexual relationships at least once a week are better off and function longer. It's not a suggestion, but when you come back home and you say, honey, I had classes with the psychologist today, and 1 week has passed. You know, it's research-based. So you just take off your trousers and they'll wait for you in bed. Honey, I'm sorry, has nothing to do with emotions. It's just science. It's pure science. Well, see, there's different ways of convincing people, right? From scientific point of view, you just have stronger arguments, right? So we spend at least 7 hours a week. Activities, loves, helps, supports, listens, talks, has sex, has an emotional influence, and cares for her. The first time I did this, I put there, he coaches her and teaches her. When I was doing this, whenever she was coming to talk to me, I never, ever listened to her. What I was doing, I was giving her advice. It was completely killing our relationship, because only then I realized the mistake I was making all the time. I come back home and we talk, and she says, turn off the psychologist. I want my husband. And I look at her and I go, what do you mean? So blind. She says, I married a husband. I didn't marry a psychologist. I want you here. Well, she was not precise. She didn't have a model. There is a different me inside of me, right? So it's just the role that I have. And to be a psychologist with your own wife never functions. So I simply eliminated this behavior. I said, stop. I will not do this anymore. I will not coach my wife. I will not teach her. And suddenly, 60% of our problems disappeared. You remember the story? Doctor, when I do this, it hurts. So stop doing it. That's it. But I had a difficult childhood. I'm sorry, we don't go there. It's a psychoanalytical model. It's past, right? We don't use it anymore. But doctor, my karma is bad. It's a Buddhist model. We don't use it here, right? But doctor, I think that I was born when there was a bad correlation among stars. It's a different model. It's astrology. We don't go there. So here we have a different model. When you want to change a behavior, substitute it with another. Eliminate one, put another, and your brain will do the same thing it was doing. Execute orders that your mind gives it. All the time, the same thing. You just have to change it. His stimulus
So he knows when to be a husband is by wedding ring and the sight of his wife. He only relates to wife. He only uses sexuality with his wife. This is how he has created himself. And obviously, it's me who has done it. So it's my husband. It will not work for you, but it works for me. It's just like bespoke suit. It's made to measure. It's yours. Otherwise, you have to use somebody else's model to lead your life, which most of us do. This is what it means to be Polish or British. It's somebody else's model. It's not yours. And it's good to know models because you enter matrix and you have to know how to behave. But as Jesus was saying, I live here, but I am from a different place. It's a completely different story to put on certain clothes and play a certain social game rather than be part of it without knowing. Father. Before, father and mother and husband were connected. But then I started to father my wife, and it didn't work because she started to turn a small princess. And then I started to lose interest because she was not a partner for me, but it became superior and inferior. So his objective is to, this is my daughter, by the way, Adriana. His objective is to raise her, educate her, to be a wise, intelligent, independent, effective, and good person. Wise from a life standpoint, to give her as many realistic experiences of what life is as possible. Intelligent, to give her models which make her effective. Independent means stop being a father at the age of 12 or 14 and become a friend, a mentor, but not a father anymore, because father is the boundary for daughters' development, just like mothers. They limit their sons. If she doesn't stop being a mother, she will have a boy who is 45 years old. There's a time to be a boy. There's a time to be a man. I cannot translate it very well into English because it's archaic language. But in the Bible it says, when I was a child, I behaved like a child. But now when I've become a man, I have rejected all what's about the child's behavior. You understand the idea, right? This is more or less how it goes. Now, when it comes to his time, he spends at least 60 minutes actively with her. Do you know why? In Poland, a regular father spends 52 minutes with a child, but not actively. I mean, I'm not sure how it works here, but you can tell me. Is it so that when you go to a playground where all the children are, you see fathers playing actively with children, or you see fathers with eyes inside their smartphones, playing games or using internet? Which one is more popular? You see? And there's a reason for it. Do you know when the father was created? Listen to this. 3 years after birth of Adriana. Isn't that a paradox? Well, it's not. Before I was a model of a father that was not mine. And you know what happened? I was sitting at home. My wife says, go and play with your child, please. And I say, what do you mean go and play with your child? For some reason, I felt emotionally motivated. I mean, touched, angry. And I say, don't I bring money home? Don't I take care of you? Do I drink? Do I betray on you? Excuse me, you're telling me I'm a bad father? Did you just listen to the model? What it means to be a father? That's exactly what our mothers wanted, right? To be a good husband is not to drink. Well, talk about so many independent women without partners right now. Well, the model has been changed a little bit. So I say, she says, no, just play with her. And I go, okay. So we take this puzzle game and we start putting the pieces together. After 15 seconds, I'm annoyed. After 20 seconds, I'm pissed off. After 30 minutes, I want to know the post address of this creator of the puzzle to kill him. Cannot do this. I hate it. Every second of it, I hate it. My daughter feels it. She goes automatically, intuitively to play with her mother. I feel rejected. I come back, open an email, and work. This is what I have been created for. What kind of model of the father do we have in Central Europe? Active or passive? Completely passive. And in Scandinavia? different model, different concept. But the point is, from which personality is men's self-esteem derived? Is it from how many Pampers you've changed, or is it how many millions you made? Obviously, we're defined much more by our successes at work. So the effect is that men don't choose to be fathers, but men choose to be entrepreneurs, business people, because the society says, if you have success in this, you're good enough. But when you're a good father, this is not such a big reason for admiration. Does it influence the way people reproduce? Oh boy, yes it does. How about Western Europe statistically? His activities are to love, support, communicate, play, to show her things, to explain her, and so on and so on. Simply, I've created him. I've created a model of a father that I'm happy with. Otherwise, I would have been passive, writing an email, spending time in front of computer screen, just because some invisible social trend demanded me and made me passive as a father. That's it. Didn't want it, didn't like it. So I created myself. Just like an entrepreneur. Look what he does. He delegates, he checks, he builds and supports. Do you know how many men come back home and instead of switching it off, they continue as bosses of their wives? Well, it's a huge problem to fire your wife, you know. And this separation or the ending, termination of this contract can be very expensive as well. Your wife is not your employee. Your husband is not your employee. And how many wives or husbands use this type of gestures to execute the orders that are supposed to be done by their husband and wives? This is not a company, this is partnership. There's no partnership if you have a boss. It has nothing to do with partnership. Simply, there's a vertical system and horizontal system. Every company hierarchically is organized on a vertical system. Boss has certain power that another person does not. This is how the contract functions. But if you do the same thing for husband and wife, it becomes completely dysfunctional. So you have to be partners. Or you start playing mother-son, father-daughter game, boss-employee game, and it's dysfunctional psychologically. This is the teacher. This is the person you know. So he has a few tasks. Let me tell you. He reads at least one psychological article a day. He improves thinking strategy in a defined context every day. He writes some kind of text every day on Facebook, blog, book, journal, article. This is why I've written 8 books. This is why 4 more books will be published this year, because I employed him, so he has a job. When he has a job, I'm on the plane, he's working for me. I don't write books, he does. He's inside my head, I turn him on, and he goes, this is the machine. But when I was putting him at home, he was destroying my relationship with my wife. This guy, I mean, I cannot even go with my students to drink a pint of beer because he keeps on teaching all the time. His mouth does not shut up. Well, he has been created to talk. I've been talking for 90 minutes. You seem to be wanting a little bit more. This is the teacher. I've created this person. It started when I was 17, now I'm 35. It's been almost 20 years of doing this. Almost 20 years. More than 200 days a year. It's been more than 10,000 hours of work. It's been many languages. It's been Brazil, Israel, Slovenia, many different places. He's simply a machine to learn and to teach. As long as he works where he should, everything is perfect. Otherwise, it becomes problematic. He has to be inside a certain context, just like every hammer. And this is a friend with another very good friend. His task is to have free time and to take care of egocentric needs. Now, do you remember, we have this model in Poland. We call her Polish mother, Matka Polka. Her ability, our mothers, were supposed to be good lovers of their husbands, good wives, good mothers, good employees, but only one thing was not allowed for a Polish mother. What was it? Her own needs. Did it frustrate her? Yes, it did. So she gave a compensating message to her daughter. You never repeat my mistakes. So daughters didn't repeat the mistakes. So they became so egocentric that right now they are unable to create relationships because unconsciously they connect being in a relationship with inferiority or dependence, which has nothing to do with that. So I've created 3-time manager. His task is to have fun. That's it. And he will drink a very good ale tonight. This is it. If I don't have egocentric needs, I'm unhappy. If I'm unhappy, I cannot work very well as a teacher or entrepreneur, and everything becomes dysfunctional. Destroy your knee, you will destroy your head. Everything is connected. I'm connected with you. You do something, it's connected with me. This is Buddha's model. I cannot be enlightened before all of you are. We all are connected. Separation is an illusion. And finally, someone who has been drawing this. Oh, by the way, this is by far the best flip chart I have worked with in my whole life. I'm so happy. This is the guy where I understood that being Polish is too little. I don't want to be only Polish. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to solve Polish problems if I'm Polish. Einstein's words. You cannot solve the problem using the same resources that created it. You have to be above. We cannot see the size of this university being inside this room. We have to go outside. You have to go outside of being British to see what British are like. This is why you have an amazing ability and amazing potential. Your potential is unbelievable in this case because being a foreigner in a different country gives you a chance to combine potentials. And you can be Polish and oh boy, financially, intellectually, emotionally, unbelievable potential, unbelievable. So I've created a citizen of the world, the guy who feels he's an earthling. He belongs everywhere. He feels at home everywhere. He doesn't treat humans as Poles, Britons, Pakistanis, Americans. He simply connects with everything that is happening. His task is to bring together, to explain, to transcend, to tolerate, to accept, to embody and to demonstrate. His stimulus is cultural differences. Simply, I don't believe that we are British or Polish. I believe we're all humans. And I've been proving to you this all 90 minutes. On the other hand, we still play the game of being British or Polish, of being German or Russian or anything else. But this is just a game, it's just a model. Change the model, you will be different. The boss is the concept of God. Then there's the observer. And someone, because it's art of synergy, right? This is my profession, this is my family, this is myself. That's it. Everything is connected, everything is working. I've spoken to my wife 2 times already today. I've sent her a few selfies. Well, because I know that when we like things we're exposed to. So I want her to like me. So I sent her my selfies, but not like this, a nice selfie, right? So when you create this for yourselves, not for yourself, for yourselves, name a figure and why do you want this to exist? Create your own father, your own mother, your own husband. Precisely when will you activate your personality? Don't say you're always going to be a husband. No, and never say you will always be a lover. Oh no. If you're a man who's always a lover, you will walk like a dog in the street. Like don't do that. It's dysfunctional. You don't want to have it always. You want to have it with the right person. Activities. What tasks do they specifically do? What's this?
Actively spend time with children.
Actively spend time with children. How specifically do you want to spend time with children?
Go out with them.
Go out. How specifically? Go where?
Walk.
Playground. Well, now this makes sense. You understand? Relationships. Who do they enter into relationships with? Don't father your husband, your wives. Don't mother your husbands. You know what will happen if you mother your husband? He will lose sexual interest with you. Simply, men are not so much attracted to their mothers. Secondly, what will happen? You will have competition. It's called mother-in-law. And My dear ladies, you will lose. Most original mothers have an idealized image of their sons. So no matter what Tommy does, Tommy is always perfect. But you don't know how to love him yet. And you don't know Tommy, you know Tom. Summary. There is no one indivisible me at the level of the mind. We have many me's, we have many yous, we have many selves, which means that what was good for me 20 years ago is not necessarily good for me right now. Our relationship with my wife has completely changed after the child was born. Our sexuality has changed. Our way we communicate has changed. I do this exercise more or less every 3 months. I actualize Mateushes. I update them. I am different. I will be different right now. Tonight, I will be thinking, what did I learn from this experience today? And I will update the system. This is what mind is. It's a program. It's full of programs. What I'm convincing you to do is to have your own programs instead of having cultural programs, which in many cases are dysfunctional. Simply, you don't need to be a herd of sheep that runs together because everyone does it. You don't need to do this. The more types of me you have, the more adoptable you are and the more conflicts you can have. If you have 5 me's, you're very adoptable. You can be a good father, a good husband, a good lover. You can be a good employee and so on. You have good models. In many cases, remember that we go to a company and our boss creates us as an employee. But if you go there and you create a better version of an employee that he has for you, he will give you the job and he will take your advice because your version of the reality will be more effective than his version of reality. And individual creation versus social categorization. What do you choose? To individually create yourself or to live the social life someone has constructed for you and live life according to a family cultural model or your own life? And this is something that I believe we can all do. Synergetically connect those two things. I can be myself and at the same time respect the fact we're in Oxford, respect the fact it's late and I've prolonged this, respect the fact we have international people here, say thank you, and wish you good luck. Thank you.